Good afternoon. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tracy Show. Before I let my guest introduce himself, we got a couple of bills to pay. First, subscribe to the channel. Somehow we lost 2 subscribers, so I need everybody to watching this to hit that, smash that, obliterate that subscribe button. Subscribing is literally free, doesn't cost you a thing to do, and it helps me to reach my goal of 500 followers or 500 subscribers so that I can then platform to 1,000, but I can't reach 1,000 until I reach 500. So please hit that subscribe button. Support me on Patreon. Patreon support allows me to get better lighting, um, and to do things that I need to do. Um, it's $2 a month, which is 50 cents a week. Better lighting, um, a desk with a microphone would be really nice, but I need your support to do that. Next to last, support my personal GoFundMe campaign that I have going to pay some personal things that are going on that I can't meet, and contribute to the First Baptist Church North Drama Academy, which I am heading up. We are trying to raise $10,000 to put inner city children in our drama camp with not one, not two, but three plays. And so your contribution of $5,000 to $10,000 would be appreciated. And we'll talk about the candidate's website here in just a moment. I am going to let my candidate introduce himself.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jon Ralston. I'm 52 years old. I live in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm running as a write-in candidate for the Secretary of State in the Arizona Green Party primary. The reason why I'm running is that the largest group of voters in most elections are those who do not vote. Public polling tends to show that Americans want a quote unquote third party. And in Arizona, non-party designated or independent voters are the fastest growing segment of registered voters. But from whom are you independent if your only choices are Democrats and Republicans? The Democrats and Republicans have set up a system that is hostile to and presents barriers to entry for candidates and parties that are outside of the Democratic and Republican kind of duopoly cartel. My candidacy intends to advocate for structural reforms that will provide for will help produce multi-candidate elections in a multi-party democracy. The things that I advocate for are voting reform, either ranked choice voting, approval voting, or star voting to remove the spoiler effect and eliminate or mitigate vote splitting. I advocate proportional representation in expanded multi-member districts for legislative bodies. I'm proposing the elimination of publicly funded and facilitated primary elections. Political parties are private organizations, and the public shouldn't be on the hook to pay for party processes. Political parties should be able to nominate and elect their own candidates via nominating conventions that they administer themselves and pay for themselves. And then along with that, there should be fair ballot access for independent candidates that want to compete in the political marketplace outside of a political party. So we would advocate for fair ballot access standards, and then reforms to the ballot challenge process, or the ballot access challenge process, where political parties and other candidates try and thwart other people from running. I support same-day voter registration. I support vote verification systems like Severa or something called ABE, which is an acronym for a better election system. These use ballot images to help reduce cynicism in election results and allow people to kind of count the vote themselves. And then finally, support safety and civility and for election administrators and election workers to help kind of tamp down the negativity surrounding elections. And those are my main platform issues.
I'm glad that you went over that because I did kind of take a look at your website. I do have, pardon me, I do have some general questions. My first one is, um, did you try to make the ballot and were unsuccessful, or did you right out the gate say, I'm going to be a write-in candidate?
Um, Basically, I decided to become a write-in candidate because we have an issue here in Arizona with the Arizona Green Party in terms of other political parties trying to hijack our ballot line when we have ballot status. And here in Arizona, there are two Republican-backed candidates that are running as Arizona Greens, trying to hijack our ballot line. We have a candidate running for governor, and then a candidate running for Secretary of State, presumably so that they could split the vote and defeat the Democrat incumbents. So I decided to run as a write-in for Secretary of State to challenge this, what we would refer to as a fraudulent sham candidate, to try and defeat him in the primary so that we would have a green running with green values in the general election for the Secretary of State position. And in our response to the news of these two candidates qualifying for the primary ballot with the Arizona Green Party, we came up with an internal statement about ranked choice voting, proportional representation, things like that, and that to me signaled a structure of a feasible campaign that I could run and issues that I could run on. So I had missed, I had originally not intended to run, but I answered the call to help thwart this Republican usurper and to actually, in the meantime, run a legitimate campaign on green values for this office.
I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying because it's making sense, but it's not making sense. So you have a candidate in Arizona who's running as a green, but isn't green to split the vote. Did I get that somewhat correct?
Yes. So in Arizona, the political parties don't have control over who they nominate to into the general election. Anybody can register with a political party. Hopefully, you can still hear me. I think my video froze. Anybody can register with a political party and then mount a campaign in the primary. Um, so that's what these two candidates have done. They got funding from nefarious sources and paid signature gatherers to get the required signatures that they needed to appear on the ballot. So the actual primary was on Tuesday, and we're still waiting for all the write-in votes to be counted to see whether myself and the other legitimate governor candidate for the Arizona Greens was able to defeat these usurpers. Um, but essentially, it's the way that things kind of work here in Arizona that we are open to that if we don't run a full slate of candidates of our own and we don't get the required signatures to get our candidates on the ballot.
And what's the signature amount that you would have to get?
I believe for a state level office, it would be for the Green Party because we have a small number. We have approximately 5,000 registered voters. We would need approximately 1,800 signatures. And to in terms of the Arizona Green Party, simply don't have the resources and the volunteers to go out and collect those amount of signatures. Our candidate for governor and for Arizona Corporation Commission attempted to do that, but they came up short. Then a little history to that is back in 2013, the signature requirements were much less. For a statewide office, it would be like 300 signatures, which was much more reasonable. However, libertarians ran for several offices, and the Republicans blamed those libertarians running for some of their candidates losing, and then they went to the legislature where they've dominated the legislature for the past 50 years and got an increase in signature totals implemented, which increased it by about 4 or 5 times, depending on the office.
So, how many people, how many eligible voters does the state of Arizona have?
I want to say over 3 million.
Okay, so here comes my question. So you need 1,800 to get on the ballot.
Certainly.
You have 3 million potential voters. And you said something that I keep emphasizing is you don't have the volunteers to go out and get those signatures. What what is hindering people from volunteering? Is it a lack of promotion? Is it a lack of finances? What is it specifically? Because I would think if I heard 1,800, I'm like, I could get 1,800 by myself.
Um, we would need to get 1,800 from registered Greens or independents. So that 3 million number then gets compressed. Um, but to answer your question, we're the Arizona Green Party. We're kind of holding things together with a skeleton crew, and we need to take some responsibility ourselves to reach out to our base of registered voters and get them more engaged, so that we're not in this position again in the future. Um, the reality of the situation is, out of those roughly 5,000 registered Greens, we have about 12 that will show up and attend meetings and do some amount of work, and the reality is about 6 of those do the majority of the work for the state party. So obviously
That's
that's not
understandable.
sustainable. um, and those people are working at their capacity, so the ability to then on top of that do outreach and or run campaigns is very straining. However, we're viewing this election cycle as an opportunity to not only run candidates, but to use those campaigns to do outreach with our base of voters and get them more engaged. So again, we're not in this position in the future.
So you have to get 1,800 of your Green Party voters, not 1,800 the whole state.
Um, 1,800 voters, green voters or independents, to sign ballot signatures, and we can do. There's like a paper signature process, and then there's also an electronic process on the Secretary of State's website. The electronic process is better because it doesn't leave you open to having your signatures challenged as easily. It just doing it through the Secretary of State's office website. It verifies people's registration and whether they're eligible to vote and things like that, and then you don't run into these little middling technicalities that people try to get signatures thrown out and candidates thrown off the ballot for, like not signing in between the lines or illegible signatures or things like that.
And so you just had your primary. So I'm assuming the general election is November the 3rd. Is that
Correct.
correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you don't get on the ballot during the primary, can you still be a write-in candidate for the general?
Uh, I don't believe so. I haven't looked into that, but we're putting all our eggs in this basket right now.
Okay, understand. Because I was like, well, if you don't make it, then what's the plan after that? Because that's, you're trying to build a party, which that's a whole different discussion that don't want to get into. But I can imagine it has its own challenges. And what I'm thinking is, like in my state, I know this number by heart. We have to get a presidential candidate, we had to get 37,963 signatures. Just it can be people who are registered Republicans, people who are registered. It doesn't matter. We can just get them from wherever we can get them. The problem in Indiana, and I can imagine this happens in Arizona, is a lot of signatures get thrown out for what I call petty reasons. The T isn't crossed, the person moved. Oh, that's not really you. Talk about that because you're talking about making ranked choice voting law in Arizona and connect those two things together because in our state, ranked choice voting has been deemed illegal. We cannot, unless we get a change in legislature, it's just illegal. It doesn't sound like you all are to that point yet, which is that's great. But how are you supposed to get that? Which I think, if you can't get ranked choice voting and you can't get then it's going to be harder to get something like the star system. And I'll ask my follow-up question when you answer this question about how do you get ranked choice voting to become law in Arizona?
Certainly. To answer the kind of question you touched upon before, we have similar uh, issues with ballot signature challenges and things like that. And that's something that I would do my best to reform as Secretary of State. Now, the Secretary of State is not a policy-making position. It's more of an administrative position. I would have to use my position as Secretary of State in the bully pulpit to then lobby the legislature, as well as make the case to the people of Arizona. The one thing that the Secretary of State in Arizona does have control over is writing what's known as the Election Procedures Manual. And the Election Procedures Manual has the force of law in Arizona. So I'm not quite certain how, if I would be able to essentially legislate and enact changes through the Election Procedures Manual. I'm certain if I tried to do drastic things, I would be challenged in court and would have to defend that. But to answer your question in terms of ranked choice voting, I was involved with an organization called Voter Choice Arizona, which ostensibly was a ranked choice voting organization, but then kind of got undermined by people looking to implement something called open or nonpartisan primaries. And while we were working on that, basically the Republicans got activated and they tried to outlaw ranked choice voting here in the state. But fortunately, we have a Democratic governor that tends to veto Republican bills, and the bill to outlaw ranked choice voting got vetoed. So a ballot initiative was put on the 2024 ballot that sounded like it was going to try and implement ranked choice voting, but it was a bad piece of legislation and it ultimately got defeated. Basically, the way that I would have to try and implement this is just kind of go to the people. We have the voter registration breakdown in Arizona is essentially a third Democrats, a third Republicans, and then a third independents. And the independents are trying to flex their muscles, but they're not organized. And they're forced to go through the Democrat and Republican parties to try and implement any kind of change, which then gets thwarted by the parties. So I would have to try and go to the people to educate them about ranked choice voting, why it's necessary, how, connect the dots between looking at your ballot and saying, why don't I have choices? I don't like any of these choices. And connecting that to the structural issues that I referred to earlier, and that ranked choice voting is one of the structural solutions to help address the situation.
Yeah, and I keep saying this in terms of ranked choice voting. Um, it took me a while to understand it. I'm not even gonna lie. It took me a long time to understand it because I'm so used to the winner take all. That's what I'm used to. It makes sense to me. You get the most votes, you win the election. That's simple. That's what I thought until someone took the time to educate me and say, no, you get five choices, or in my example, five choices, and you rank your choices. And I'm like, oh, I did that in junior high school. And it made sense. I'm like, oh, I guess what I'm saying is I wish a better explanation of ranked choice voting could be done to make the public understand. It's like you're ranking Pepsis or you're ranking sodas and you're ranking your top five. And whoever wins, you get your first round, you get your second round. But so many of us, like my old me, we're just used to you get the most votes, you win, and you get two terrible candidates, and you're really not looking at the third because the third has to do all these things to get on the ballot. And ranked choice voting levels the playing field, which is why Indiana made it illegal.
Yes, particularly with the Republicans, uh, they try and fight anything that increases voter turnout and gives people more choices. Um, so they're automatically opposed to ranked choice voting, and they spew a bunch of nonsense about it, but it's not true, and it's basically uh, we rank things every day. So if my wife sends me to the store to pick up some ice cream for her, she says, well, if they first look for Chunky Monkey. If they don't have Chunky Monkey, then get me fish food. If they don't have Chunky Monkey or fish food, just give me some vanilla. That's ranked choice voting. You rank your first choice first, and if your first choice can't win, then you have backup choices. And unfortunately, people don't do a very good job of explaining it that way, but it's fairly easy to understand if you have like a visual and somebody walks you through the process. Interestingly, there's an Amelia Bedelia children's book that talks about voting, and they basically go through this kind of basically instant runoff process that's essentially ranked choice voting, even though they don't use the words. So it's something that, if given some time, given a proper explanation, people understand, and then they think, well, why don't we have this? Because they want more choices, but they understand. They intuitively understand the issue of vote splitting and voting for, feeling the pressure and coercion to vote for quote unquote the lesser of two evils, and then this just perpetuates a system of the duopoly that doesn't get things done and doesn't try and solve problems.
And see, I say split the vote. And maybe I'm wrong on this, but I'm like, you know what? Split it. That's making sure that third party candidates get elected, not the two-party system. Because at this point, what do I have to lose?
And that's
You've proven yourself. You're not working. You're not working in my best interest. You're sending money overseas. You're doing all these things I don't want. So why not vote for this third alternative?
certainly, and that option is always there, and that's why I'm working with I'm an Arizona Green, and I'm active in the Arizona Green Party, and I'm running as a candidate because we need to give people choices, and people are going to, like I said, the largest group of voters in most elections don't vote, and that's a complex issue. But one of the reasons why people don't vote is they don't have people that represent them on the ballot. So we're going to give people choices. We're going to let them vote, and then if people are concerned about the vote being split, and the Democrats always complain about the vote being split when Greens are on the ballot, then we just tell them, here are your solutions. We're going to assert our First Amendment rights. There's 5 freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment: press, religion, but then speech, assembly, and redress. And we're going to assert those 3 freedoms of the First Amendment by being candidates, organizing campaigns, and running political parties that represent people. And if
Hmm.
the Democrats or Republicans don't like that, then they need to implement solutions that allow for more participation. So we're essentially going to kind of force their hand by running candidates. And if they want to try and find a solution, then we have solutions for them. If they don't, then kind of like you said, the vote's going to be split, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you said that because going back to the 2024 election, some people, I call them blue MAGA, they're trying to frame the picture as, oh, well, if Kamala or Kamala, I don't know how she pronounces her name. I feel like war criminals, I really don't care, but um, it would have been so much better if you all had just voted for her. And I'm like, no, it wouldn't have been. How is she different? And I've looked at like your race and some guests I've had, and I literally can't tell the difference between the Republican and the Democrat. I'm just like they take money from exactly the same place. They have exactly the same policies. It's really one bird with, I would say, 2 wings, but there's really aren't even 2 wings. It's the same wing because they believe the same thing. They take money from the same people. They have the same policies. And I don't see the difference.
Yeah, and that's a frustration a lot of people have. Um, Now, I mentioned in my opening statement that there's polling that shows a majority of Americans want a third party, and we speak in code in our culture. You know, they're not rushing out to become Greens. They're not rushing out to register with the Libertarian Party or No Labels or whatever, but they want choices. Uh, so we're going to offer people choices, and like I said, we're going to challenge in the system, and you know, the main thing for people to understand is no candidate or party is entitled to a vote. They have to go out and earn it. And we're going to go out and do our best to earn votes and challenge in the electoral marketplace and let the chips fall where they may.
Right. But here is one thing I read on your website where I have some concerns. So you state on your website, which let me bring up the website so people can visit it. There is John's website that you can visit to see his platform stance. Um, you state something that in theory, I know where it's going, but I can see a lot of problems with this. You're stating that political parties nominate their candidates in a private nominating convention. And here's where my concern is it's private, right? And I know you're applying it equally to Greens and Democrats and Libertarians and PSLs and all of those things. However, my concern is that, well, this could happen on a third party too, is they push who it is that they want to the forefront, and they're not listening to what the actual, well, let me backtrack. There's like, how would people be? Would they be delegates? Would they be assigned? Like, if you're a Green Party voter, you voted at your convention on XYZ date, and that's your nominee. What kind of guarantees would there be that the party's going to have an open process for that? Because what I can imagine happening is you could have a situation like we had in Indiana with our Secretary of State's office. They pushed a candidate. This is who you were going to vote for. This is who we're supporting. And really, yes, you can vote, but this person's already got it.
Yeah, and I understand those concerns. Those are reasonable. But we kind of already have. I think you just kind of illustrated that we already kind of have that in Arizona. The Arizona Democratic Party essentially the apparatus chooses the candidate that they're going to get behind and throws their full force behind that candidate, and the primary is essentially meaningless. The other people will get forced off the ballot, and if they survive ballot challenges, then they just the apparatus, the media apparatus, the uh, consultants and things like that just kind of railroad uh, their candidate through the process. The positive way that I see this working is it would empower the grassroots to develop, for the parties to develop essentially what are the precincts in Arizona. There's basically the hierarchy is you have the state, you have the counties, cities, and towns, and then voting precincts, which are essentially neighborhoods. And like in Pima County, where I live, there's like 275 precincts. And ideally, functioning political parties would go out into the grassroots at the precinct level and develop leaders and party members that then are active in the party. They're at the grassroots. They understand what's going on in their neighborhoods, and that creates a bottom-up effect for the parties to have an open process. And it would be to the party's benefit to have an open process, because according to the initiatives that I'm putting forward, if a party becomes kind of tyrannical and top down, which I think is kind of your concern, which I think is legitimate, they then have a pressure release valve to then run as an independent with fair ballot access standards as independents. So my hope is that if this were to become law and become practice, that it would actually empower parties to develop their grassroots, develop their own selection criteria and open process, and then administer their own elections. And that last part about administering their own elections, I think is important, because here in Arizona, we're ground zero for this stop to steal an election integrity nonsense. And election officials are span the electoral spectrum, ideological spectrum. They're professionals, and these claims about election integrity are essentially nonsense. So, um, my proposal would force political parties to administer their own elections and see how easy or difficult it is to run a fair, free and fair election within their own party. And there's an opportunity for them to be, laboratories for democracy, and then there's opportunities to kind of work out the kinks. And then if their candidates ascend to the legislature or whatever, then they can put forward those solutions to any problems that come up along the way. But my intention is for this to be a bottom up process, not a top down process.
Right, because I figured you would say answer that question in that way, which you should. But I was just, I think of the worst case because I'm thinking of, oh well, this is the way that the two-party system currently works. And I think you're leaning more towards, well, it could, and not to say what you're saying is bad, because in theory I agree with it. But I can just imagine that just going off the rails if you get a power hungry, APAC supported person in there that just has all this money and they are able to just railroad the system. But you're, like I said, I agree in theory. I just wanted to know how you would go about addressing that concern because it's a real concern of mine.
Certainly.
Um, Another thing you say on the website, which I again, um, I definitely agree with, um, is something that we definitely don't have this in Indiana. I don't think you all have it in Arizona, and I don't know. Well, I know why Republicans don't want it. I can't understand why Democrats don't. And that's same day voter registration. I don't get why a party that needs people to come out for them and to increase their voter roll hasn't legislated for same day voter registration. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. To be honest, I haven't read the Arizona Democratic Party's platform, so I don't know if they support that or not. In fairness to the Arizona Democrats, they've never, at least in my lifetime, or at least the time that I've lived in Arizona, I've lived here since 2000, they've never had control of either house, either the legislature or the Senate and the state level. We've kind of become a fairly evenly split state in terms of state level offices. The Democrats have made strides. They've had the governorship a couple times, but they never owned, or they've never had a majority in either the legislature or the Senate. So they haven't been able to enact something like that. And as I've said before, the Republican Party, just as a part of their DNA, they want to drive down voter turnout. A lot of Republican election type people either have connections or have been a part of the Heritage Institute, the Heritage Foundation. I can't remember. I'm blanking right now.
Probably, like probably.
And the originator, or the founder of the Heritage Foundation, Heritage Institute, is pretty famous for saying that conservatives do better when turnout's down. And even the Arizona Republican Party had a lawsuit in 2020 after all the shenanigans they tried to pull in terms of recounts and things like that. That made it to the Supreme Court, and their attorney argued in front of the Supreme Court that it benefits Republicans to drive down voter turnout. So they're never going to advocate for a same day voter registration. They're never going to advocate for more people exercising the franchise. They're going to do their best to keep voter turnout down. And I believe personally that this is what is driving a lot of the quote unquote election integrity type stuff. It's what's driving President Trump's most recent address to the nation. And that was a not so subtle pressure tactic to get what's known as the SAVE Act pass, which would be a disaster, which would really drive down voter turnout in terms of forcing people to tediously and over provide proof of citizenship in order to register to vote.
Or I always argue it might ignite anger because those type of things tend to backfire. When you tell people they can't do something and somebody's stopping you, a third party candidate, if they're smart, would market that and say, hey, look, they're trying to stop you. Show up and vote. I don't
Hmm.
know how you do that. I'm not a consultant or anything like that, but
Sure.
I think that could work against them because that doesn't, again, it doesn't make sense to me. Why would, I mean, I get what the Republicans are saying, high voter turnout means that they're not in office, but why don't they just do the things that would keep them in? See, I'm asking all these philosophical questions. I'm like, well, why don't you just do what would keep you in office? That would make sense to me, but apparently I'm being Tracy the simpleton.
No, you're not. Um, Basically, the factions that make up the Republican Party, same thing with the Democratic Party. There are factions that make up the Republican Party that basically hate each other, but they hate the Democrats more than they hate each other. And this hatred of the other side keeps them together, um, where um, ideally we would just allow them to fracture and form other parties, and then we would have 5 to 7 other parties. And with the reforms that I'm advocating for, we could then, they can run their own candidates. We have ranked choice voting. We can have consensus candidates that win with a majority of the vote. And then one of the things that ranked choice voting and approval voting and such like that do is they incentivize people to compete in the electoral process, but then cooperate in the legislative process. So it changes the incentive dynamics there. Um, so that's another reason why I am proposing the initiatives that I propose to change incentives and systems that will hopefully improve our governance and our society.
And everybody, don't take offense, but it's been really hot here in Indianapolis, and I have my air conditioner on, which is why I got this on because I'm just really cold, but I don't want to turn my heat on. So just pardon me, but it's cold, and I'm like, I'm not gonna turn the air off because it's extremely hot outside. Anyway, another thing that I think is this one, this is another one that I see where you're going with this, but I'm not sure I understand the train of thought. You talk about the elimination of primary elections. And this is probably where I'm guilty of thinking of the current two-party system because I think that's where I, in other thought, that elections are won not in the general, but in the primary. If you can change who is elected in the primaries, you're way better off because that's where you can either elect a candidate that is extremely brilliant for the people and etc., or you can get somebody like Trump. And I think primaries make the difference. But talk about why you think it's important to eliminate primaries.
Well, just as I stated in my opening statement, political parties are private organizations, and the public shouldn't pay for political parties' uh, processes. And I supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020, and if anyone who watches this was a Bernie Sanders supporter, they'll realize that the game was rigged. Um in both 2016 and 2020. Bernie Sanders essentially in 2016 sued the DNC, and the lawsuit, he lost the lawsuit because the judge basically came back and said the Democratic Party is a private organization; they can do whatever they want. And then in 2020, the Democratic Party, Barack Obama and a couple people behind the scenes just basically cleared the field so
No,
that
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. They would never do that. Me with as much sarcasm in my voice as possible.
certainly. So, this is where, again, I think the political parties have. My wife just came home. The political parties have that influence already. Let's stop allowing the public to pay for it. The parties can pay for it and have their own process. I personally think my proposal would empower the grassroots more. Um, it would allow just the activists in the party to have the influence on the party's nominee, and I think that helps the party to begin with, and then the other initiatives that I would propose would provide a full slate of diverse candidates in the general election, which is where most people show up and turn out for the election anyways, to then evaluate which candidate works best for them. And then you have voting reforms like ranked choice voting that allow us to kind of settle out who the majority winner is and coalesce around a consensus winner.
Like I said, I agree with the public not paying for it. That part I'm for. But here's where my other flip side comes in. Like I said, I think that primaries do serve a purpose, but what I failed to think of, and the thought just literally crossed my mind, when a party has a primary, they have to pay for space, the taxpayers have to pay for space rentals, volunteers, voting machines, people to count the ballots. I took away all of that, like out of my calculation, because again, I've been indoctrinated. And I didn't even think about that till I thought, well, wait a minute. When you're going to an election, somebody's there to take your ballot. So that person isn't doing it for free. Why can't the party pay for that? I mean, the Democratic Party has billions of dollars and they're just sitting on it. Why can't they just do that?
I agree.
Matter of fact, they could get a Google Doc. Just create a Google Doc, email it out to everybody. Well, no, some people don't have email. Our older citizens don't have email.
And these are the things that election professionals have to figure out and deal with. And uh, it would help the electorate to understand these problems that uh, election officials actually have to deal with, and instead of going on, Truth Social or whatever, and assuming everything's a conspiracy, forcing the party and the party's activists to actually have to confront all of these issues within administering their own process, I think will help make our overall process better and will help tamp down this nonsense about election integrity and stolen elections and things like that.
Right. Because they could just do mail-in ballots. I remember during COVID, voter turnout was actually higher because we got the ballots in the mail and we were able to just mail them back. That was way better than me getting in my car at 7 o'clock in the morning because I like to vote early. I'm not one of those vote at 5 o'clock people. I like to get it over with, done with, and I'm done. But I was way more inclined to return that ballot in the mail. Of course, Indiana has banned voting by mail, which your site didn't talk about, but I think that's a really good way to go at it. Just have people mail it. Just put it in the mail. Um, but states ban that because that increases again. Republicans want low voter turnout, and I say Democrats want low voter turnout also because they never fight the efforts that the Republicans are doing. But what I'm getting at is maybe putting like what the actual cost of a party holding a primary election is, because if I'm not thinking about it, I don't think the regular voter is getting like how much it actually costs for to put a primary election on.
Certainly. And this what we're doing right now is exactly what would happen. And that's one of the benefits, kind of putting a flag in the ground and saying, this is what we want to do. It generates all this debate and discussion. Well, how much does an election cost? What goes into an election? What things need to be done? There are what's involved just in ballot design. There are tons of different ballot designs for any particular election, depending on the precincts and elections and things like that. So, a fundamental issue is in my opinion, in terms of our politics, is a lack of civic engagement and an understanding of the process. And my little controversial "let's eliminate primaries," it forces people to confront things that they just take for granted, and the debate that would ensue with trying to implement this, I think would be very fruitful for everyone involved in terms of learning all the aspects of elections, all the things that election administrators and election workers do already, and putting that in the political parties' laps and saying, "Hey, you have to do that," and then that makes, I would assume, the Republicans then hopefully backtrack a little bit with all their election denial nonsense.
Well, I mean, they're just doing it because unfortunately people's attention span is that of a microwave oven. It's
Hmm.
just quick. And they're taking advantage of that. And that's where I, you know, um say we all could do a better job of doing our research.
Sure.
Um I
I,
actually
I
didn't
do want
think
to
of the
interject you.
touch.
Um,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
that's all right. I just remember you mentioned the mail-in ballot situation, and why I didn't address that on my website as a campaign issue. We have mail-in voting here in Arizona, and it is extremely popular. I don't have an exact number, but I would say probably 80+% of voters in Arizona
Oh,
vote.
you all have it? Consider yourself fortunate. Our idiotic, stupid, makes me mad governor. Gosh, we I still contend Indiana has the worst governor lieutenant governor combination in the entire United States. Nobody can beat those two. There's not a team that's worse than those two. But yeah, we just said, unless you're in a nursing home, pretty much that's the only way you're getting the ballot. Everybody else, no, you gotta show up. But
There are people
yes,
in
consider
Arizona that
yourself
would like.
fortunate that you do have mail-in ballots because we don't, and I really miss it.
Yeah, and we're very fortunate to have that here. There are people in Arizona that I think would like to roll that back, but that would be very politically unpopular.
Now, another thing that you talk about on your website, and I'm 100% in favor of this, and I wish more people in the Green Party would talk about this, is proportional representation. And there are so many benefits towards proportional representation in terms of, yeah, I'm going to just say it, in terms of the race of the people that are actually being represented. Black people are underrepresented. I don't care where I'm talking. I don't care what state I'm talking about. I don't care where I'm talking about. We're underrepresented. I probably imagine that's the same with the indigenous population that's high in Arizona. So I'm assuming it's high. While the numbers are high, the representation is really low. And talk about the importance of proportional representation, not only in terms of race, but in terms of gender, in terms of sexual, or just in terms of the overall goal of proportional representation and what that actually means to Arizonans.
Yes, Arizonans, yes. Just as you stated, proportional representation allows for a broader representation. What we would do is, say, like for Congress, instead of just having one representative in a district, we would expand the district and then uh, increase the number of Congress people in that district to like three or five. And then this would better ensure that everyone has some representation in Congress from that district. And then with the voting reforms in terms of ranked choice voting and approval and things like that, there are ways to run elections so that people are elected proportional to the demographics and breakdown of that district. So this discussion is timely in terms of dealing with the assault on the Voting Rights Act that's been going on through cases in the Supreme Court. With proportional representation, we could get around these fights to undermine the Voting Rights Act by broadening by running the districts and enacting proportional representation so that groups that are in that district have the better opportunity to elect somebody that represents them.
And here is what I want to say to the low-key MAGA people that watch this podcast, because I know you're out there because you complain to me all the time. You shouldn't. I know the Republican Party is not for proportional representation. I would be willing to bet my house, my car, my groceries, every dollar that I have. I wish they would just say they like the status quo, because the benefits to proportional representation, it just makes sense. If you're in a neighborhood and most of the people in that neighborhood are indigenous, why should they not have an indigenous person representing them? It makes sense to me. But for some reason, red MAGA, and sometimes supported by blue MAGA, says, oh, well, no, we have to have corporate candidate, blah, blah, blah. And there's actually districts in the United States that have high Black populations, but guess what the representative is not? They're not Black. And I'm not saying that just because you're in, and I don't like the word minority, I cannot stand the word minority. So I'll say you're in a lesser population doesn't mean you can't have a voice. And the opposition to proportional representation, I have never understood it. I'm just like, what? It doesn't, like, my mind is just not comprehended. I can understand the apprehension to ranked choice voting, kind of, maybe. On some level, I can understand making the parties pay for their own primaries. Okay, maybe, but I cannot understand the opposition to proportional representation when it just makes the most common sense to me.
I agree, and um, conservatives just generally don't like change, and I understand that. But proportional representation would actually benefit them as well. Just think about uh, majority Democrat districts. You know, I live in actually a majority Democrat congressional district. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm going to say it's about 60-40, 60% Democrat, 40% Republicans. So under proportional representation, those 40% of Republicans would get some representation in my congressional district, where now they get none. And we also kind of see this at the city level where I live in Tucson. It is an all Democratic city council because of the way things work. And again, I don't know the exact split, but let's say 60-40. If there were proportional representation on the city council, then the Republicans would actually get some representation. So unfortunately, these things get bogged down in partisanship and things like that, where in reality it just benefits people more and allows them to have better representation. And then, like I said, hopefully the incentive structure changes so that once people do have representation, then that representation is looking to work together and solve problems as opposed to fight each other and tooth and nail.
Now, moving into your campaign, you said that you're putting all your eggs in one basket, hoping that you make the ballot, and there's no plan if you don't, which that's a good way to think about it. That's an all-in mentality that you've taken, which I wish more third-party candidates would take. What is it that you've done to make sure people are aware that, hey, I'm running for this office, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is what I want to do? Because your platform is excellent. Like I said, I in theory agree with everything that you have on there. I just wonder, if you have such few volunteers, how are you getting the word out?
Certainly. So, like I mentioned earlier in the show, the actual primary vote was on Tuesday, and I've gotten some social media up, but I haven't put a whole lot of energy into that social media because the name of the game was to get the word out to our registered Greens. And as an endorsed Arizona Green Party member, I had the advantage of having access to voter lists and things like that, and just old-fashioned way, just sending out postcards and letters and things like that to registered Greens to get them to write myself and then our governor's gubernatorial candidate Carlos Melendez in to fight these Republican-backed hijackers. Just old-fashioned trying to whip the vote. For the primary, we're waiting for write-in votes to be counted. Unfortunately, write-in votes tend to be the last votes that are counted, so we have to wait for all the counties to do what's called their canvass, which is basically their report on the election results that then gets transmitted to the Secretary of State's office. They do their canvass, and then winners are officially announced. What happens during regular elections is statistical analysis occurs based on all the data that comes out of voting precincts and things like that, and then they're able to make a projection. But the actual declaration of winners usually occurs a week or two after the actual election. And as a write-in candidate, I have to wait for the actual declaration because we're write-in candidates. So we put all of our eggs into the turn out the vote basket. Should I be lucky to actually win a write-in election and advance to the general election, my name then appears on the general election ballot, which is huge advertising for me just by being on the ballot, because, like I said, a vast majority of Arizonans vote by mail. Though even this negates the need to have a huge budget for advertising and a huge ground game when people will just get their ballot and they'll look and they'll say, "Who is this Jon Ralston guy?" Type it in, then they will find my website and my social media. And if I win the primary, then I will transition into putting more time and effort into social media and hopefully more interviews like this where people can then kick the tires and see, get a feel for who I am and for the reasons that I'm running, and explanations and justifications behind my platform positions.
And you just got to my next question because I looked on your website and I did not see a donation link. Was that intentional?
Yeah, I've been flying by the seat of my pants since I kind of decided late to run as a write-in and thwart the usurper. So I'm not entirely certain what campaign donation rules entail. Like I said, I put all my effort into just trying to turn out the vote. Should I win the election, I will then have to form a campaign committee, and then I'll research the ability to have a donation link and make donations. In the meantime, if people liked me or like what I have to say or have a favorable impression of me and the Arizona Green Party, they can go to the Arizona Green Party's website, azgp.org, make a donation to the Green Party in general, or the Pima County Green Party, pimagreens.org. That's where the county in which I work out of, where I live. If people feel compelled to make donations at this point, they can go there. If I do qualify for the general election ballot, then I will put serious time and effort into learning all the intricacies of that and get a donation link up and going.
Yeah, because I was like, well, he did. I'm so used to telling people donate to the campaign, donate to the campaign, don't. I'm like, well, I can't tell anybody. I thought that's where you were going to head to, but I'm like, I don't put words in people's mouth. Um, Tell us, because to be honest, I did have a hard time finding you on social. I think I found you through uh in the two-party system group. I think that's how I connected to your campaign. So how do people connect to your campaign? Like on social media? Are you on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram? How can we find you?
Yes, most of my socials should be listed on my website, the Jon Ralston 4SOS. I have an X account, a Blue Sky account, an Instagram account, a YouTube account. Um, if I qualify for the general election ballot, then I'll get a TikTok and probably an Upscroll as well, and we'll start churning out content for all of those.
Thank you so very much. And guys, I forgot all about this special announcement. We do our Saturday show. John, you don't know this because you don't watch me on Saturdays, but please do. But anyway, I do a completely silly show on Saturdays because I believe, we've got to with what we got in the White House and what we got going on. I believe wholeheartedly we need a good laugh. So I will be talking about stupid cartoon villains on Saturday. Then Sunday, I will be having, instead of doing the Sunday show, we'll have a special guest, Jordan Conley from the state of Hawaii, that's running for Congress. Then that Monday, we're going to have Ken. I cannot pronounce Ken's last name, but we'll have Ken in. He's running for governor of Pennsylvania. So we're going to have a show Sunday and Monday and Thursday. So just make sure you're watching. Like I said, I had double booked some interviews and everybody was really really good about moving. But that's gonna be a lot more work for me and I'm ready to do it because we've got to get the word out. We cannot, the Democrats especially, have shown they can't be trusted. And I know people have feelings about DSA. I got my own thoughts about that, which I may or may not share in the future. But there's another way. There's another way to get what we want. And until we get there, this show is going to exist. I'm going to keep interviewing third party candidates like John, who, like I said, visit his website. Um, and once he gets on the ballot, again, I never speak in defeat, I speak in victory. Then he'll have that donation link. Um, but but stay tuned. We've got a lot more candidates. Buckle in because we're gonna have that. And final announcement, and I promise this is the last one. August the 15th. That is a Saturday. I normally have a forum called the State of the Black Voter. And I've always had females. This year, not so. This year, I'm having 5 African American males. So it'll be on my channel. You won't see my face because I'm not male, but you will see 5 African American males. And this will be the first time I've had an all male panel that's at 6 o'clock, August the 15th. Please, 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 please. If you don't watch any other shows that I do, you'll watch this show. But I'm saying if you don't watch any show in the future, make sure you're on that because we've got a lot. Well, the panel will have a lot of discussion on that. I will be backstage just monitoring things because that's just me. But John, thank you so much for attending today. I appreciate your time. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Like, share, comment, subscribe. And finally, like, share, comment, subscribe. I will see you Saturday at 7 o'clock p.m. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you, Tracy.